Hi friends, still at Adepticon, but you know those stupid clip show episodes that TV shows do when they need a filler episode? Yeah, we hate them. But, on an unrelated note, please enjoy the Inquisition mega video. Hi friends, today we're gonna talk about the Lamenters. Hey, ow, Hi friends, it looks like I got arrested by the Inquisition, so I guess we'll talk about them instead. Also, this topic was chosen by the winner of a very special Christmas paint competition in my Discord. So, check out the Discord, and while you're at it, you might as well sign up for my Patreon too. But anyways, the Inquisition are the ever-inquisitive, all-powerful, sometimes insane branch of the Imperium dead set on ensuring the purity and loyalty of all Imperials. They're a core part of the setting, and they completely embody the paranoid and oppressive side of the Imperium. At the same time, within the Order, there are just so many different perspectives and personalities, it really makes for interesting stories. The Inquisition was founded long ago, right before the Siege of Terra, as things were their most dire. The Emperor ordered the Super Chad Malcador to find the most loyal, most skilled, and most inquisitive Imperials to form a secret order meant to sniff out and snuff out the most heinous threats to the Imperium, both through deadly force and knowledge. Along with this, Malcador also created the even more ultra super secretive chapter of Space Marines known as the Grey Knights. More on them in the future though. But anyways, after Malcador perished and the Emperor cosplayed a golden carrot, the Inquisition began to get more and more extreme. In order to effectively do their job, the Inquisition was given total autonomy, unlike most other Imperial factions, and they only have to answer to the Emperor himself. So, in the current setting, they basically do whatever they want as long as they think it'll benefit the Imperium and it's not too controversial with the other Inquisitors. The Inquisition's primary job is to investigate and perhaps destroy anything they suspect may pose a threat to the Imperium. Heresies big or small, nothing is safe from the wrath of the Inquisition. Except for maybe silly funny commissars with imposter syndrome perhaps. And the Inquisition's wrath is widely known and even more widely feared. Of course, to many, they're known as those insanos who blow up entire planets because the local burger emperor forgot their ranch dressing. And while there certainly are excessively cruel inquisitors and exterminatuses certainly do happen, the perception of the exterminatus happy inquisitor is pretty misguided. Exterminatuses are actually quite rare and considered a heavy and unfavorable decision since it's a huge waste of resources. Furthermore, many Inquisitors prefer to operate in a much more covert style than spamming Death Stars. Many Inquisitors do not show their hand until they absolutely have to. Remember, Inquisitors are investigators and researchers first and foremost. Many only whip out their mega weapons when they determine something is a valid threat. A lot of Inquisitors like to act incognito and will employ various disguises or alternate identities. For example, Amberly Vale of the Caiaphas Cain series likes to disguise herself as a beautiful babe in order to hide the fact that she's a beautiful babe who can have you and your entire planet turned into Cheeto dust if she deems you yucky enough. However, when they do find something a valid threat, they have near unlimited heretic annihilating potential. Since they're such a prestigious organization in the Imperium, they have access to nearly all of its resources, and they have enough influence and fear surrounding them that whatever they don't have access to, they can pretty easily requisition if they ask nicely enough. Or, I guess ask meanly enough, depending on the Inquisitor. These resources include, but are definitely not limited to, Space Marines, Planet Killers, illegal tech, over 80 million power in Rise of Kingdoms, Caiaphas Cain and his stinky friend, and basically anything else you could ever want for. But more on retinues later. First, we must discuss the ordos of the Inquisition, or at least the important ones since there's basically one for anything and many of them are self-explanatory. Anyways though, there are three major ordos, Malleus, Hereticus, and Xenos, also known as the threat beyond, the threat within, and the threat without, which just sounds sick as hell. The Ordo Malleus are the demon hunters of the Inquisition and specialize in combating the forces of chaos. They were the first Ordo created as chaos was and arguably still is the greatest threat to the Imperium. After defeating Horus, the Emperor officially established the Ordo Malleus to defend humanity from the forces of chaos while he sat on the sidelines for a little bit. The Inquisitors of Malleus often work alongside their Ordo Militant, the Grey Knights, and are even based on the moon of Saturn Titan alongside the Grey Knights. At first, they were a heavily guarded secret order since Chaos itself was a secret, and you could kind of put two and two together if you knew an anti-Chaos team existed, well, you know. However, over the years as the warp threats continue to grow, the Ordo is becoming more known as tales of their horrific might spreads across the galaxy. Next up, we have the Ordo Hereticus, which was actually the third major order to be founded, as it was made after the Age of Apostasy, but its alt name sounds a lot better second, and it effectively bridges the gap from Hereticus to Xenos. These are the witch hunters of the Imperium, and to the Ordo Hereticus, the greatest threat is the one that festers within. This is the biggest Ordo, and as their alt name suggests, they deal with threats within the Imperium. These include, but are not limited to, rebellions, unsanctioned mutants, rogue psychers, chaos corruption, normal corruption, and Xenos incursions. I think the last one kinda gets sidelined as Hereticus simply sounds more chaos-coded, but Hereticus certainly does deal with things like gene stealer cults and Tau being gulp nice to people. Along with ensuring Imperials are properly loyal and devoted to the Imperial cult, a big job for Hereticus is to watch the Ecclesiarchy alongside the minor Ordo Sanctorum and ensure that no one is getting as corrupt as the infamous Goge Van Dyer. And since they keep a close eye on the Ecclesiarchy and love purging the heretic more than anything, their Ordo Militant is the Sisters of Battle. Then finally, we have my favorite one, Ordo Xenos. And if you couldn't already tell, 1, you aren't near analytical enough to be an Inquisitor, and 2, you probably aren't even analytical enough to recognize that I just called you dumb, and 3, yes, of course the Ordo Xenos deals with the Xenos threat. This ordo was founded after the War of the Beast, when said beast waged war and nearly destroyed the entire Imperium. It was at this moment that the Imperium decided that the funky little aliens of the galaxy were actually a threat and not just some loser guys to kick around while they waited for chaos to show up. If only GW would also recognize this. The Chamber Militant of the Ordo Xenos is the Death Watch. So, of course, they often fight together, and Inquisitors can call upon the Watch's aid whenever they need it. This Ordo is also the best since it has Death Watch, Amberley Vale, and Eisenhorn. But with those Ordos covered, I need to remind you that the Inquisitors are not a hive mind, and within the organization, many Inquisitors have extremely different perspectives and methods of operation. Even within the same Ordos, Inquisitors can widely vary. That's why generalized statements like, Inquisitors are all completely callous exterminatus spammers, kind of fall flat. Yeah, many Inquisitors are some of the most evil dudes in the Imperium, but not all of them, and that would apply to basically any wide-sweeping perception of the Inquisition. You can't even really say that every Inquisitor wants to kill every Xeno, heretic, or witch. Once again, even within Ordos, it's not so clear-cut. Some Inquisitors take the inquisitive part of the job much more seriously and are researchers first and foremost. After all, a key function of the Inquisition upon its founding was learning and understanding the enemy in order to destroy them later. In other cases, Inquisitors might even act diplomatically with the enemy in order to prevent unnecessary conflict when there's more pressing matters at hand. To further demonstrate the myriad of ideologies, one large and perhaps the most pressing significant ideological difference within the Inquisition is the schism between the radical and the Puritan. And I thought we were talking about the Inquisition, not Twitter, am I right, boys? Come back next week for some more gripping political commentary. But deep and super original jokes aside, the Puritans of the Inquisition believe rules as written and hold imperial doctrines as complete fact. They allow no room for interpretation and are the most likely to do the meme thing of declaring anyone who looks funny a heretic. On the other hand, the radicals believe rules as intended and act on their interpretation of the Inquisition's purpose and the ideals of the Imperium. They believe that the ends justify the means and will use any means necessary to eradicate their foes. This means they often employ unorthodox tactics to combat threats to the Imperium. This willingness to bend the rules is technically allowed as the Inquisition has unrivaled freedom within the Imperium. However, it causes conflicts within the Inquisition as the Puritans disagree with the arguably heretical action of the radicals. But finally, let's talk about the funky fellas that Inquisitors can enlist into their funky friend groups. As I've said previously, the Inquisition can basically requisition any Imperial force to work for them. so I'll only cover the notable ones here. If I miss anything, just assume that the Inquisition could probably work with them. Members of an inquisitorial retinue are called acolytes. Acolytes can be permanent members of a retinue or temporary tools at the Inquisitor's disposal. This is also how new Inquisitors are made, as particularly promising acolytes can be promoted into Inquisitors if his or her master finds them worthy and 3 other Inquisitors also approve. So, first off, the Inquisition can of course call upon Imperial Guard forces to aid them. Depending on the task, this can range anywhere from penal legionnaires to the endlessly awesome Kazerkin. Woo! They've also got their own inquisitorial stormtrooper force, but any Inquisitor with an ounce of cool would try to get some Kazerkin. If they're worthy of the Kazerkin's help, of course. Then, next up, we of course have their respective ordo militants. That should be obvious. So obvious, in fact, it makes me endlessly annoyed that you can't take Death Watch, or Grey Knights, or Sisters of Battle in the Inquisitorial Agents Kill team. Watch till the end for a mini rant and some of my silly ideas. But other than their own Marines, the Inquisition can also call upon other chapters to help them out if the need arises. And since it's not usually a good idea to say no to the guy with the planet-killing button and the unlimited freedom to use it, most chapters heed the call. Inquisitors, especially those in Malleus or Hereticus, also like to have a Psyker or a Blank in their party in order to properly deal with enemy Psykers. Unless, of course, the Inquisitor is a Psyker themselves, which is actually quite common. Yeah, who would have thunk that reading minds might be useful for the nosiest investigators in the galaxy? Then, related to Psykers, we got one of the coolest, if not the coolest acolyte type, the Demon Hosts. These dudes are wicked cool and metal as hell. Long story short, they're demons bound to mortal bodies and commanded by the person who bound them as long as their willpower is strong enough to overcome the demon within. The idea of just having a demon-possessed corpse fighting your enemies for you is just super cool. Then, related to demons, we got Hierophants. No, not those ones. That would be kind of funny though. But no, inquisitorial hierophants are priests who guide the Inquisitor's prayers, exorcise demons, and probably have holy water super soakers. But jumping off the funny idea of an inquisitorial hierophant, the more radical of Inquisitors can also enlist the help of sanctioned Xenos. A Tyranid would never get sanctioned, but working with the Eldar Tau or maybe even a Necron isn't off the table. Also Orc mercenaries, but the Imperium is generally more racist to Orcs than the first 3 I mentioned. Even Ordo Xenos Inquisitors might work alongside Xenos. This may be for temporary diplomatic reasons, for research, or just because a particular Xeno dude is really good at killing a Xeno species you happen to hate even more than you hate the aforementioned Xeno dude. But to cap off this section, we have various killing machines, literally and figuratively. We got assassins, arcoflagellants, crusaders, desperados, gland warriors, etc, etc. Basically just a menagerie of insano killers. Like I said, their reach is expansive, and if you can think of it, they probably work with it. The Inquisition is a fascinating force in the world of 40k. They have one of the hardest quotes in the setting, maybe ever, and it really sums up the Inquisition as a faction. And it is a quote that I will now read. "My patience isn't limitless, unlike my authority." Ooh, such a simple line, but it's just so dang cool, especially since it's said during a rare moment of empathy in the 40k universe. Thank you, Mr. Eisenhorn. Jumping off of that, the autonomy of the Inquisition also makes for some really cool stories, as they aren't bound by any rules and the writer can just kinda go nuts. All in all, the Inquisition is one of the most integral parts of the 40k universe and are a really cool faction with a lot of creative freedom behind them. But let me know what you think about these funky fellas. What's your favorite Ordo? Or who's your favorite Inquisitor? Let me know in the comments below. Hi friends, Space Marines are certainly cool, but you know what would make them even cooler? Well, if they're all wizard knights, had sweet shiny armor, and arm guns. With all that cool stuff, you have the Grey Knights. The Grey Knights are a rather unique chapter and are one of the most, if not the most, elite Space Marine chapters ever. These fellas are the premier demon hunters of the Imperium as the Ordo Militant of the Inquisitorial Ordo Malleus. The Grey Knights were made at the tail end of the Horus Heresy, right before the final clash with Horus. The Emperor prepared the Imperium for the worst. Well, some would say that the Horus Heresy was the worst, so I suppose the super worst. But anyways, knowing that if he fell, the Imperium would be vulnerable to the ever-growing forces of chaos, the Emperor sent Super Chad Malkador to gather Imperials fit to defend humanity from the ever-growing chaos menace. Malkador brought forth 4 normal human lords and 8 space marines. Most of the marines were likely from his Knights Errant, which were an elite group of marines from all chapters, traitor and loyalist, who performed special operations for Mr. the Sigillite. These marines were taken to the moon of Saturn, Titan, to establish a new chapter in the ultra super secret fortress monastery on Titan. Originally, this new chapter began with marines from existing legions, but going forth, all new aspirants would be forged with a special gene seed based on the Emperor himself. Malkador appointed Janus, a former Thousand Son, to be the first Supreme Grand Master of the Knights and began production on the new mysterious breed of marines. And thus, the 666th chapter was born. Cause yeah, 18, 19, 20, 666. Alright, that's a bit disingenuous as there is an in-lore explanation for this. During the Siege of Terra, there was just so much insano warp energies in the solar system that funky shit started happening. And of said funky shit, one of the funkier shits was the entire moon of Saturn just disappearing into the warp. And then years later, during the second founding, it finally returned. And thus, the Grey Knights were officially dubbed the 666th chapter, which also seems a bit far-fetched as the second founding almost certainly didn't have 646 new chapters. But we all know that the Grey Knights were clearly named the 666th chapter because it's cool and edgy, and they just wrote some of the lore to be band-aid solutions to the reasonings. It doesn't really matter that it doesn't make sense, because it's cool, and it's also kind of funny that the ultra demon-hating chapter bears the number of the beast. But anyways, one convenient thing about your super mega chapter disappearing into the warp for a bit is that the warp is a strange place and time rarely progresses regularly. Plus, you'll constantly be facing demons and horrors beyond human comprehension. Which, that second one might not sound like a benefit, but for insano super dudes like the Grey Knights, it indeed is. So, when the Grey Knights returned to real space, they were already a full-fledged chapter of elite demon-killing machines, fortified against the treacherous influences of chaos. How convenient.
Oh boy, that certainly sounds cool. How can I become a Grey Knight?
Well, first off, every aspirant has to be a psyker, so tough luck, that writes off 101% of my viewers with an approximate 1% margin of error. But for the absolute 0% of you who are psychers, these psychers are often chosen from the black ships transporting psychers to Holy Terra. Promising psychers are taken to the Chamber of Trials on the Grey Knight homeworld of Titan, and if they pass the trials, they are subjected to a more sophisticated version of the regular Space Marine augmentation process and psycho indoctrination. Then, after all that, they have to pass the 666 rituals of detestation. These rituals are super mega nutty insano. So nutty insano that most full-fledged Space Marines wouldn't be able to pass them. But if these aspirants do pass, their memories and their past lives are wiped and they're given a new name. Reborn, the Space Marine neophytes train under a Justicar until they're promoted to novitiates and are officially accepted into the chapter. The final standard augmentation for Grey Knights is a subdermal silver purity ward across their body to further fortify them against the influences of chaos. Each and every Grey Knight is a powerful psyker, and they're trained to harness their psyker energies into a protective warding aura known as the Aegis. This training allows them to essentially channel their soul energy through their armors and become anathema to demons, kinda like a mini version of the Emperor's aura. In addition, they're taught anti-demon tactics. One potent tactic is true names, and another is of course cool sword skills. But back to the first one. To demonstrate how powerful true names really are, one time absolute mad lad Supreme Grand Master Caldor Drago was able to incapacitate a demon Primarch Mortarion by speaking his true name. By speaking his true name, he was able to weaken the Primarch, and then he flexed on him by carving the previous Grandmaster's name into Mortarion's heart. Now, depending on how much you like the Knights and/or how much you think that Chaos is a total joke, this moment may or may not be total bullshit. But it is a canon moment that demonstrates just how powerful of an asset a true name can really be. This moment is totally bullshit though. Anyways though, although Grey Knights are some of the best, if not the best, and they have some of the best, if not the best equipment to face chaos, the forces of chaos are endlessly vicious and viciously endless. So, in the grim darkness of the far future, not even the stalwart Grey Knights are immune to getting stabbed to death by big old demon swords. When killed, if possible, a fallen Grey Knight is taken to the death field to Titan. Their body is then cleansed of taints, and then a 666 word oath of sanctity is inscribed on their corpse. But Grey Knights are a lot more interesting alive, so let's talk about their fighting style and unique weapons. All of the Grey Knight stuff is made on their exclusive Forge World at Deimos. Since Deimos is a moon of Mars, it's one of the smallest Forge Worlds, but it makes some of the most powerful gear. So that's right, fellas, size doesn't matter. Also, funnily enough, this moon was magically taken from Mars' orbit and put into Titan's orbit. How convenient. Of these weapons, we obviously have their arsenal of Nemesis Force weapons that fits their knightly theme. Force weapons are weapons that are psychically attuned to the user to be extra deadly to their foes, and extra deadly to their demonic foes. The most common Nemesis weapons are swords, halberds, demon hammers, warding staves, and, coolest of all, dual Nemesis falchions. Woo! Wait, probably just as cool as the falchions is the mother flippin' Nemesis Doomfists of the Dreadnoughts and Dreadknights. Woo! Then, in conjunction with their melee armaments, one of the coolest and most iconic aspects of the Grey Knights are their fucking epic arm-mounted storm bolters. Woo! Coolest shit ever. Originally, their Nemesis weapons had bolters on them like Custodi Guardian Spears, but they eventually switched to having arm mounts, probably because it's sick as hell. The arm mounts free up their offhand to better use their melee weapons, but it also keeps them ready to unleash ranged salvos at a moment's notice. These bolters are operated with psychic impulses, and each of their bolts are meticulously crafted over many years. To make even a single blessed null bolt, a person pure of soul and devotion is sacrificed. And you thought 50 cents to shoot a 357 was bad. Phew! The sacrifice of a single person is debatably worth it since null bolts are extremely effective against warp entities as it severs them from the immaterium and thus greatly weakening them, if not just straight up killing them. But also, storm bolters shoot like a ton of bolts, so is like a single burst really more effective logistically than a few guardsmen or a gaggle of devoted Imperials? I don't know, but it also shows how insano and callous the Imperium can be, so that's interesting flavoring at least. Also, theoretically, these would only be used against greater demons and other threats that are near immune to conventional weaponry, but I play Chaos Gate Demon Hunters, and let me tell you, hundreds of souls are lost to kill no-name hobo cultists and overly suspicious pillars, so take that as you will. Moving on, some common special weapons that the Knight choose are Psy Cannons, Silencers, and Incinerators. Psy Cannons are basically storm bolters that use an even more insano round charged with negative psychic energy. Then, Silencers are actually a Xenos weapon modified to be used by the Grey Knights. Their exact function is unknown, but it basically focuses and amplifies the user's psychic energies into energy blasts. These blasts are so potent that they could destabilize demons. And then finally, incinerators are basically just flamethrowers, but with, you guessed it, psychic charging. The Promethium used is psychically charged to shoot impossibly hot flames and to melt demons with literal hot burning holy faith. Then, up next, we have their iconic Aegis armor. This is a special modified variant of power armor with special psychic circuitry and anti-chaos wards. Once again, many psychers are sacrificed to forge a single suit of Aegis armor. And to me, this is more justifiable than the damn bolt since the armor isn't really an expendable resource like the ammo is. But thanks to the kind sacrifice of those psychers, Aegis armor is super durable and resilient against demons, psychic attacks, and obviously conventional weaponry. But if they want to be even more unkillable, they can opt for Terminator armor. And uniquely, every single Grey Knight is authorized to use Terminator armor rather than just a veteran, since to even become a Grey Knight, you're already the top of the top. Then, as for Grey Knight tactics, they operate in complete secrecy. Even to other Space Marines, the Knights are either wholly unknown or mere myths, and to those who do witness them, they're mind wiped or executed. To ensure this secrecy, the Knights are only called to face the most heinous chaos threats. When summoned, they try to complete their objective as quickly as possible. So, they'll teleport close to their enemy as possible, wreck shit, and then teleport away in complete secret. And if any other Imperials do catch a glimpse of them, well, the Inquisition will throw a bitch fit and try to execute all those Imperials. Furthermore, in the tactics department, Grey Knights are often put into specialized squads. Strike squads are the basic unit that forms the backbone of their formations. Inceptor squads are the coolest ones, as they all have personal teleporters to wreak havoc with unparalleled mobility. Then, purgation squads are the heavy weapon specialists. And finally, the two most elite squads are the purifiers and the paladins. Both of these are composed of the most elite and most pure knights in the chapter. The purifiers are the holiest and most spiritual. They ensure the sanctity of the order while also inspiring their brothers in battle. And the paladins are the most accomplished fighters in the chapter. These dudes are even nuttier than the average Grey Knight and are some of the most skilled combatants in the Imperium and entire universe for that matter. Then finally, let's close this off with the coolest Grey Knight, nay, the coolest Warhammer unit of all time. The greatest, the most badassest, ultra spectacular killing machine, the Nemesis Dread Knight. Okay, well, not gonna lie, I do kind of like the Dread Knight. It kind of reminds me of those Matrix mechs, or even more badassly, the Lego Exoforce dudes. Plus, this is far from the dumbest thing in the Grey Knights. Their average lore blurb is like 5 times sillier than how this thing looks. If the model could just do anything but its silly ass awkward prom picture stance, it actually does look pretty badass. Plus, this thing was made to combat greater demons, so the imagery of this thing dueling a huge bloodthirster or something is just super hella cool. But that's the Grey Knights. If you want an ultra elite but not quite Custodes elite, super ultra pure mega marines, then these are your boys. Hell, in their entire chapter history, not a single knight fell to chaos. Oh man, that is pure. And also, admittedly, I've never been that big of a Grey Knights fan. I'm more of a Space Wolf enjoyer myself. One big hangup I have is that I'm torn whether or not I like how silly extreme their lore is. A lot of people say that Grey Knights are an example of grim derp, and that would be because they are. Like, the 1 in a million novitiates becoming Grey Knights thing. A single life for a single bullet. Hundreds of lives for armor, etc., etc. It's just logistically absurd. Like, it's hard to believe that 1,000 Space Marines or something is somehow less effective than a single Grey Knight. Or hell, even a custodian seemingly has less sacrifice made to make one of them. And I actually love the silly and over-the-top nature of 40k. Grey Knights just kinda skirt the line for me. On one hand, I love that they exemplified the needless, insane sacrifices that the Imperium is willing to make just to try and preserve their dying empire. And I love how it hammers home just how fucking absurdly elite and insano the Knights are. But on the other hand, it's almost just too stupid. And I know some of the Grey Knights' more dumb lore got retconned, but I'm still iffy on them. But, I mean, it's hard not to like super wizard space marines with dual magic swords and an armed machine gun. And also, aesthetically, they're some of my favorites of all time. I'm just not a huge fan of their lore. Also, Grey Knight players can piss off with the wolf hate. So many Grey Knight fans say how stupid and Mary Sue the wolves are, but brother, you literally like the Grey Knights. When you get down to it, the Space Wolves and the Grey Knights are actually quite similar. They pull off absurd feats that shouldn't be possible. They're great against psychers, they love their runes, and they have crazy extremo characters, and so on and so on. Space Wolves just aren't total dickheads like the Grey Knights are. Also, I don't even care about the OP characters in a setting like 40k since I believe rule of cool trumps most things and OP characters are cool, but just don't be a hypocrite with your blind faction simping. But anyways, I think I sufficiently pissed off all the Knights viewers, so let me know what you think of them. Are they the coolest chapter of all time, super duper mega marines, or Are they just grim derps shiny idiots? Let me know in the comments below. Hi friends, today let's talk about a faction that really embodies some of the coolest aspects of the Imperium. They're hyper zealous, mega religious, and hotties? That's right, today we're talking about the Sisters of Battle, or the Ordo Militant of the Adeptus Sororitas if you're a nerd. The Sisters of Battle are the Ecclesiarchy's military force since long ago the decree passive forbade the Ecclesiarchy from allowing any quote-unquote men under arms. And then almost immediately after the decree, the Ecclesiarchy became the that guy of the hobby shop, ignoring rules as intended in order to exploit the rules as written so that they could field a giant army of powered armored nuns with guns. And thus, we have the Sisters of Battle that we all know and love today. But the Sisters of Battle weren't always the Sisters of Battle. Before they were the Sisters, they were known as the Brides of the Emperor. And before that, they were known as the Daughters of the Emperor. And before that, they were known as, oh, that kid is cute, maybe I should have a daughter too, of the Emperor. And the Daughters of the Emperor were a pretty unknown secret warrior cult on the world of San Lior. They were a highly devout cult of women dedicated to the Emperor. But unlike regular cults, which usually ask for money or make you drink Kool-Aid to meet aliens, the Daughters of the Emperor learned how to kick ass so that when they actually did meet aliens, they could kill them. No Kool-Aid necessary. But anyways, these ladies remained somewhat obscure until Mr. Goj Vandire heard about them and was like, oh gee willies, a whole army of hot babes to kill my enemies. And he went to San Lior to recruit them. And at first, they thought he was a gross weirdo on account of him being a gross weirdo. But Van Dyer, through smoke and mirrors, convinced them that I was blessed by the Emperor. And by smoke and mirrors, I of course mean las guns and shield generators. And after his little trick, the Daughters of the Emperor devoted themselves to Van Dyer, thinking that they were serving the Emperor's disciple. Under Van Dyer, they're renamed the Brides of the Emperor, given their iconic power armor, and they became some of the best, if not the best, elite warriors in the Imperium. The Brides proved to be a potent force for Van Dyer's ecclesiarchal armies, even standing up to Space Marines in the Age of Apostasy and Van Dyer's Reign of Blood. Towards the end of the Reign of Blood, the Adeptus Custodes pulled a little gambit to sway the tenacious Brides of the Emperor. The Golden Boys took the leader of the sisters, Alicia Dominica, and 5 of her besties into the Imperial Palace to meet the Emperor himself. Before the Emperor, they realized that Van Dyer was a fraud and were overwhelmed with anger at Van Dyer's treachery. Miss Dominica went back to Van Dyer and executed him. Grr, Goj, you will no longer be Goj Van Dyer because I will make you Goj Van Die. Grr, a chop chop. Afterwards, Dominica established the Sisters of Battle, and the Sisters of Battle became some of the Imperium's greatest warriors. Dominica's personal order was the Order of the Ebon Chalice. It was also around this time when the High Lords created the Decree Passive, and Sebastian Thor immediately pulled the loophole to get a military force in the newly formed Sisters of Battle. In the current time, the Sisters of Battle remain some of the most devout warriors of the Emperor and are arguably even more zealous than the most religious Space Marines. The Sisters of Battle are trained from a young age in the Scala Progenium to be the best warriors they could possibly be without extensive gene enhancement or augmentation. I still think the Khazarkan are better. They don't need fancy-pantsy power armor or miracles to kick ass. But that's not to say sisters aren't great warriors. I'm just a huge Khazarkan simp. The sisters are some of the best humanity has to offer, and they have some of the best gear of regular humans. Even before their murder school curriculum is over, the sisters are formidable warriors, and sister novitiates are sometimes recruited into inquisitorial retinues or trusted to carry out vital missions and kill teams led by sister superiors. This ensures that many novitiates get actual combat experience before being made a full-fledged Sister of Battle. Once made into Sister of Battle, the novitiate is given power armor and her sacred bolt gun. Almost every piece of equipment that a sister uses is blessed, anointed with holy oils, or otherwise warded to enhance the sister's effectiveness against the unholy, the unpure, and the downright heretical. Their power armor is a special pattern fitted for regular humans to use. Much like Astartes' power armor, the Sisters' armor greatly enhances their speed, strength, and durability. And they also have plug ports so they can interface more naturally with their armor and mostly be unburdened by it. But they don't have the black carapace of Marines, so they're slightly more sluggish than a Marine would be. This is of course on top of the relative sluggishness that would come from not being a genetically modified super freak. But the scissors are still quite agile and can easily outpace normal people. Then, beyond the bolt gun, the scissors of battle frequently use flamers and melta guns. The bolter, the flamer, and the melta make up the scissors of battle's holy trinity of weapons, which is just cool as hell. Plus, they also frequently use chain swords, power swords, plasmas, and other Imperial staples. They just usually prefer to immolate their foes in holy flame. In battle, Scissors are ruthless opponents. Along with their top-of-the-line war gear, the Scissors' extreme faith helps them punch well above their weight. The Scissors' faith is at an absolute wacko extreme crazy style levels, even compared to the average super crazy style religious Imperial. This means that beyond making them have near inhuman levels of resolve and willpower in battle, the Scissors can literally make their faith manifest in battlefield miracles and other wacko things. One of said nutty wacko things are their living saints, and perhaps the nuttiest living saint and most famous sister of battle is Saint Celestine. Saint Celestine was just a normal lady who got blasted, and then she was just a normal sister of battle who got blasted. But through faith and miracle, she was resurrected and eventually got imbued with divine powers. She donned the armor of the legendary Saint Catherine and found the ardent blade in a crypt she was put in. She proved to be a powerful warrior and inspiring figure on the battlefield. Eventually, she was once again killed, but she got resurrected. Then again and again, killed and resurrected, blah blah. And over time, she became more angelic and powerful. Along with her resurrections, she also has angel wings, the ability to resurrect other sisters and other divine silliness. Now, not every living saint is to the level of Saint Celestine on a holy moly scale, but many do have some divine boosters, and nearly all of them are at the very least some of the greatest warriors in the order. Also, saint status isn't just reserved to sisters, any Imperial can be given sainthood, one of the most notable examples being Lord Solar Macarius, the coolest dude ever. But jumping from one of the coolest dudes ever, let's talk on some of the coolest units ever. The Seraphim and Zephyrim are the coolest Sisters of Battle unit as far as I'm concerned. These are Sisters of Battle with jetpacks shaped like angel wings who fly around the battlefield, killing whatever dares to disgrace the Emperor. The Zephyrim are the melee variant, utilizing power swords and bolt pistols, and the Seraphim are the coolest shit ever variant. These chicks usually dual-wield pistols of the bolt, flame, and inferno variety to carry out rapid hit-and-run strikes across the battlefield. Dual pistols are badass, angel jetpacks are badass, put them together, and that's like double badass. Seraphim, more like Sarah flipping cool, man. Am I right, boys? Both these units are seen as angels gracing the war zone and vanquishing foes of the Emperor from the skies above. They often inspire sisters, guardsmen, and other Imperials, reinvigorating them for even more killing. But another interesting and iconic unit of the Sisters of Battle are the Sisters Repentia, and the Repentia are actually some of the most 40k units out there. They really embody the zealotry and insanity of the Order, and by extension, the 40k universe. Repentia are Sisters of Battle who have disgraced the Emperor in one way or another and seek repentance. Wait a minute, holy moly, Repentia want to repent. Yo, who would have thought? So, after whatever shameful thing they did, they're stripped of their armor and weapons and given a giant eviscerator and sent into battle. The Repentia can repent for past sins usually in two ways. Either she's blasted to bits on account of her being a naked crazy lady with a giant sword, or if the Repentia somehow survives enough battles, kills enough heretics, or otherwise proves that she's a cool lady, then she is seen as been giving the Emperor's blessing and guidance, and is reinstated as a Sister of Battle proper. And I just think the idea of the Repentia is really neato. The idea that the Sisters of Battle have full faith that the Emperor will protect them and will guide them as long as they're righteous, so much to the point that they'll charge at pretty much anything with no armor, a big ol' sword, and a kill you attitude is just so cool. Oh, and they also have church tanks and drop chapels. Their dropship is a church. They shoot missiles out of a church pipe organ. Badass. Which brings us to my favorite part of the Sisters. They're just like super cool, specifically with their aesthetic and vibe. They really embody what I feel most people envision Warhammer to be. Religious imagery having a freakazoid baby with cool sci-fi shit. They also have some of the absolute coolest art in the setting. It has a real grimdark vibe that I feel a lot of people kind of think is leaving the setting. But now, let's take a trip to Serious Town to discuss one of the most pressing and important questions of all. Would the Sisters of Battle be hotties? The answer to that is resounding yes, obviously.
For Emperor's sake, 2 out of the 3 of their holy weapons are heat-based, you dummy. Fire is hot, duh. And I'm no chemist, but to melt something, you gotta make it HOT hot. So yes, the Sisters of Battle are confirmed hotties. Woo! So, to quote the ancient hymn, ahem, HOTTOGO, burn the heretics head to toe. Am I right, kids?
But yeah, that's the Sisters of Battle. They're a really cool faction that really leans into the religious stylings of 40k in a very cool way. Bang bang, crazy religious chicks in power armor are just super cool. Doubly cool when they have angel wings and dual bolt pistols. And triply cool when those chicks jump out of drop chapel screaming hymns. And like I said before, I think they have some of the coolest 40k art out there. I'll also have to cover the orders and characters in a future video. Morven Vol is a total mad lad. Or, I guess Mad Lad E, I suppose. Hi, friends. Aliens are cool, right? No, they aren't. And if you said yes, neither are you, heretic. That's right. Today we're getting xenophobic. Even more so than the standard 40k xenophobia, because today we're talking about everyone's favorite black armor clad space marines. Are you kidding me? I obviously wasn't talking about them. No, I'm talking about the Xenos Hunters of the Imperium, the Death Watch. The Death Watch are the chamber militant of the Ordo Xenos branch of the Inquisition, and they were technically made during the tail end of the War of the Beast, but officially founded after the war. The idea of the Death Watch was born when Lord Commander Courland, also known as Slaughter, also known as the dude with the dumbest but also coolest nickname in the Imperium, required elite kill teams to combat the Beast and complete key objectives. Unfortunately for Mr. Slaughter, most of his forces were, ironically, slaughtered by the humongoid orc wall, and no marines less than a veteran will be able to carry out his vital orders. So what's a guy to do when he doesn't have enough marines to finish his 2,000 point list? Well, steal some of his friends' marines, of course. Courland assembled his kill teams from various veterans of the shredded chapters under his command, and for their inaugural mission, he eased them into their new role by sending them on a relatively easy mission. You know, these kill teams were sent to take out an attack moon. I don't think I even need to explain what an attack moon is for you to realize how crazy it is to send a few marine squads to take one down. But I will. An attack moon is a gigantic orc ship that, as its name suggests, attacks and is shaped like a moon. Due to a little thing called physics, an attack moon's gargantuan size means that it can cause major damage to planets just by teleporting close to them and letting gravity all over the place. That's no moon. It's an attack moon. Once the war was over, the Ordo Xenos was officially established alongside the Death Watch, since the Beast Wah showed the High Lords that aliens were in fact a threat and not just some stupid morons to shoot at while the Marines waited for some Chaos guys to kill. The new Space Marine chapter was called the Death Watch, since they were meant to monitor the Imperium's death by the hands of Xenos that the Imperial Lords had foretold of, which honestly is a lot cooler than being called Death Watch because, watch me cause death, brother Killgun. With the new Inquisitorial Order established, it was decided that the Death Watch would be an Inquisitorial force, but it would be led by a Space Marine chapter master so that they would still retain a bit of autonomy even while under the Inquisition. Also, small aside, the first chapter master, or Watch Commander as the Death Watch would call in order to stay on brand, was a dude called Asgar Warfist. What a name! He might just take Courland's title for dumbest, but also coolest name with that one. But anyways, let's talk about the real reason the Death Watch was founded. It was made because it's freaking cool, bro. Black armor is cool, having a bunch of Space Marine chapters squad up to kill aliens is cool, stealing said aliens' weapons and using them to kill even more aliens is cool. Even their name is freaking cool. The Death Watch? Come on, man. You can't tell me that having a kill team with a vampire, a werewolf, and an emo isn't cool. Wait, that's just Twilight, damn it! Luckily, though, that kill team had a shark to make it less Twilighty. But yeah, the Death Watch's defining trait, their 1 minute elevator pitch, is that they're the Spec Ops dudes made up of a bunch of different Space Marine chapters. Almost every chapter is ready to send veterans to serve in the Death Watch if the need arises. Only one has ever been said to have refused sending Marines to the Death Watch, and they were eternally shamed for it.
By drawing from a diverse range of Space Marines, the Death Watch is more tactically flexible due to the unique skill sets of the various chapters and is able to learn from the Marines' experiences fighting different Xenos species. Depending on the chapter, service in the Death Watch can be a great honor, a punishment, or just a convenient way to get rid of Marines that the chapter just doesn't really like. But no matter the reason, the Marines that are sent to the Death Watch are usually some of the best killers in the chapter, if not the best killers in the chapter. The Death Watch regularly carries out near suicidal, ultra important missions, and as such, they mostly recruit veteran Marines. And the ones who aren't veterans are just particularly talented in the art of shooting an alien's head off with a cool explodey gun. To be selected to be sent to the Death Watch, a Marine needs heart, body, and soul. As such, they're usually appraised by a captain for their skill in battle, an apothecary for their physical fitness, and a chaplain for the strength of character and if they have a soul fit for blasting aliens. When recruited to the Death Watch, the Marine paints their armor all black except for the right pauldron and left arm. The right pauldron is left in their original chapter colors so that the armor's machine spirit isn't disturbed. Stupid racist machine spirit. Except, I guess that joke doesn't really work since the machine spirit actually gives the Death Watch its color diversity, so I don't know, dude. I'm sorry, it was a bad joke, guys. Berate me in the comments if you will. But in addition to their colorful pauldron, they also have their iconic silver arm, just like Keanu Reeves and Sebastian Stan. And just like Mr. Silverhand, the Death Watch Marines use specialty rounds for their hand cannons, and just like the Winter Soldier, they're mega indoctrinated super soldiers. Let's address that last part first. When joining the Death Watch, the Marines are given extra hypno indoctrination on top of the standard indoctrination given when first becoming a Marine. They're taught to be even more blindly devoted to the Emperor, to be even more xenophobic, and the knowledge of how to dispatch all known xenospecies with efficiency is implanted directly into their brains. It's kind of like the Matrix scenes, except instead of Kung Fu, they're taught Xeno F you. But finally, last and most fun of the recruitment process, each Death Watch member has special training sessions, and these fun little activities consist of being put into a tiny cell called a penance box, getting a cute little psycho stim hat, and then being forced to witness their brothers being brutally killed by a variety of Xeno species. And this isn't just them watching it, mind you. The box and hat make it so that the Marine experiences the things firsthand and they feel the pain and sensation of their fallen brothers at the time of their death. It's kind of like a souped up 4D SpongeBob ride. You see the events, you feel the motions, you smell the smells, it's the whole package. So they could feel the rending claws of a gene stealer tearing them apart, feel their molecules being shredded by a Necron's Gauss blaster, feel the burning sensation of being melted by hails of tau plasma, or whatever horrible fate may befall a noble warrior of the Emperor. On the bright side, the Watch Council does make sure that the Marines don't see any footage of their own chapter being killed, unless that Marine's being punished or something, since watching their own chapter being slaughtered, oh, that would just be too torturous for the torture indoctrination. As if seeing your friends getting killed wearing a different color would really make the experience any more fun. And unsurprisingly, these sessions are hated. But they do teach the Marines to abhor the alien, and it instills them with a murderous fury that they can unleash when the time calls. It should be noted here that even though the Death Watch is taught to hate the Xenos more than GW writers apparently do, the Death Watch isn't always just insta-kill on sight to any alien they see. Depending on the occasion, the Death Watch may spare the more reasonable Xenos like Tau or Eldar in order to further their study or to steal their tech for themselves, which leads to our next point and probably my second favorite aspect of the chapter. The Death Watch are generally allowed to employ any means necessary to fulfill their objectives. As such, their arsenal is vast and a lot less restrictive than other Imperial forces. A few restrictions that they spit in the face of is not using Xenos tech and not being able to make any technological innovations. Along with killing the Xenos, the Death Watch are also commonly tasked with recovering Xenos artifacts and weapons in order to study the enemy, and sometimes they get to keep these cool toys for themselves. The mechanics often modifying or reverse engineering such things to fit Imperial use. Some notable things they've been said to use are modified Tau guns, Necron phase blades, and Eldar skulls for servo skulls. They also usually give them silly names to half-heartedly cover their Xenos origin. Things like Eastern Fringe Artillery and Xenos Phase Blade. No, 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 it's not called a Xenos Phase Blade because it's from a Xenos, you moron! It's because I phase it through the Xenos to kill them! On the less heretical side of the armory, the Deathwatch have ready access to special bolter patterns with unique bolt rounds like Dragonfire, Hellfire, Kraken, Vengeance, and many more. Those first two not actually being incendiary rounds, despite what their name suggests. Infernos are the proper incendiary rounds. Dragonfires actually release superheated gas, and Hellfire shoot thousands of acid covered needles into whatever unfortunate idiot let themselves get shot. They're actually called Hellfire because you fire them out of a gun and you say, "What the hell?" when you hear how horrible it sounds to get a million needles exploded into your tummy. And then there's like a million other bolt rounds that I won't get into in this video, but one I do think are cool are Bane bolts. These are bolts made after Archmagister Erexia spent her entire life developing them, and they're said to be the perfect bolt chill, and if they're shot at center mass, they can kill any target. Some other cool weapons they have are shotguns with special shells, which should be self-explanatory, frag cannons, which should be self-explanatory, and Infernus heavy bolters, which should be self-explanatory, but if that last one isn't, they are literally heavy bolters with heavy flamers taped underneath. It's heavy Inception. But it's not just their guns either. Their armor can also be modified to have enhancements. One particularly cool one being active camouflage. So, much like a Halo Elite or a real life cuttlefish, some Deathwatch operatives can change their armor color to blend in with their surroundings. This, in addition to sound suppressors in their armor, makes them excel in stealth. And finally, they have a special gunship just for them called the Corvus Blackstar, which, that's like the coolest name ever, come on. Next, let's quickly go over their tactics. Unlike most chapters, the Watch deploys almost exclusively kill teams made up of all specialists and are usually commanded by an Inquisitor. Each kill team is specifically made up of operatives that would best suit the mission. For example, if you need to destroy a Tyrannid horde, you might bring a Blood Angel for their melee specialty and experience with Tyrannids, a Salamander to lay covering fire and burn swaths of bugs, and perhaps a White Scar to match the Nid's speed and hack them down. Or you can make a team of an Iron Hand, Imperial Fist, and Ultramarine to put the enemy to sleep and bore them to death. I'm just kidding. I actually like the Ultramarines and Imperial Fist. They're pretty cool. And finally, let's go over some of their unique and cool operatives. Sometimes when a mission doesn't require an entire kill team or it requires a more stealthy approach, the Deathwatch can send a kill marine. These marines act as lone operatives and can go on long missions to infiltrate and investigate potential threats or targets. Wait, they're kill marines because they're just one marine and not a team. This might win the award for the dumbest but also coolest name. Next up are the Black Shields, and they're probably the most popular special operas of the Deathwatch since they're pretty cool. Black Shields originated during the Horus Heresy, since during the Heresy, some Marines would just leave their chapter and work alone. Most commonly, this happened because the Marines' Legion would turn traitor or they rejected the path that their Primarch took. But it could also be as simple as a Marine just being so tired of the heresy that they decide to leave their chapter and do their own thing. In present times, Black Shields most commonly work alongside the Deathwatch as they no longer associate with their home chapter. Generally, becoming a Black Shield is seen as one of the most dishonorable things a Marine can do as they betray their chapter and they sever all ties. As such, other Marines treat Black Shields as ill omens and they're usually not ever accepted back into their home chapter. However, Deathwatch is willing to accept any Marine who's skilled enough to kill some aliens, so they're open to taking in Black Shields. In battle, Black Shields are noted as being unusually reckless and sacrificial, likely due to the shame of being shunned from their chapter, disillusionment with their original chapter, or simply just to fit the lone wolf archetype and get a cool death scene. One notable Black Shield is former Ultramarine Captain Demetrian Titus. After being tried for heresy by the Inquisition and eventually being deemed free of taint, he was inducted into the Death Watch, where he served as a Black Shield since he believed himself to be a disgrace to his chapter. However, in a rare exception, he was welcomed back into his original chapter when Chief Librarian Tigerius found him on a mission. So that's the Death Watch. They're really cool and definitely my top 5 favorite chapters. I like the Supa chapters, I like the Spec Op feel, and I like their use of cool ass, super illegal weaponry. Sure, they're kind of in a making the stupidest decision ever competition with the Grey Knights, but who really cares when they look this damn cool? Also, I'm super hyped to play as a Deathwatch Titus in Space Marine 2, so that's another big reason I made this video. But yeah, how can you not like Spec Op Marines in all black armor who use alien guns to kill aliens?
Hi, friends. Today I'm going to talk about a topic near and dear to my whittle crack heart. Today we're going to talk about the Imperial Stormtroopers. No, not those ones. I mean the hell gun toting, carapace wearing, ultra elites of the Imperial Guard. And yes, that means the Kazakh are in this very video. Let's go, baby! The magnum opus of this channel is today because I get to talk about my favorite things in all of Warhammer. But we'll get to them later. First, though, what exactly are stormtroopers? Well, in the Astra Militarum, stormtroopers are a general term for the elite shock troopers of the Guard. No, not those ones, even more elite. Stormtroopers are the absolute best of the best for the Guard. They're highly trained, ultra confident, and widely feared. They're the absolute peak of the human physique and are basically like special forces or heavy infantry of the Guard. Think laser blast and Navy SEALs, SAS, or whatever your favorite country spec op guys are called. Now, dudes like the Navy SEALs are already badass in real life, so add a bit of 40k insanity and you're bound to get the Navy SEAL of approval and total badassery. These are just regular humans who get sent on suicidal Space Marine level missions and they get shit done. Most regiments have access to stormtroopers in some capacity, and the regiment specific ones oftentimes have slightly different roles in training. So, today I'll talk about all the notable ones, and before getting into that, let me just describe some of the general traits that all the stormtroopers display more than less. Every type of Militarum Stormtrooper is at peak physical physique, sometimes even sporting some light genetic enhancements and other augments. Despite being mostly unaugmented, these guys are sometimes described as doing actually insane feats. Things like fighting orcs in melee, matching Dark Eldar in speed, dodging bullets, and other things humans really shouldn't be able to do. Along with their physical strength, stormtroopers are also efficient tacticians and have incredible combat instinct. They make split-second battlefield decisions and work in near-perfect coordination with their squad mates. They literally have the power of friendship on their side. Additionally, stormtroopers are given some of the best equipment of the Militarum. They're issued carapace armor, which, like an ogre, it's got layers, and the armor is essentially an in-between of standard flak armor and power armor. It's very resistant to weapons up to lasguns, which, if you actually know lasgun lore, is actually mighty impressive, but it won't laugh off a plasma shot or anything. Speaking of plasmas or anything, stormtroopers also have access to a host of special weapons like plasmas, meltas, hotshot volleys, or pretty much anything else that the Imperials use. But even their standard weapon is a potent killing machine. Hellguns, or hotshot lasguns if you're a dork, are basically supercharged lasguns that have extreme penetration abilities. This makes it a very formidable weapon. The standard lasgun is already devastating against fleshy bits, but it struggles against armor. By literally bypassing that weakness, the Hellguns are a hyper-lethal weapon that can even efficiently kill Marines. But what's a weapon if you can't aim the thing? Stormtroopers are expert marksmen. They target weak spots and shoot with near perfect accuracy. I know tabletop isn't always consistent with the lore, but they have the same accuracy as Space Marines and sometimes even better. Space Marines are mega augmented freaks with literal aim assist, so this says a lot. Essentially, Stormtroopers shoot as good as your friend thinks he does in games. But finally, let's get into the specific type of Stormtroopers because, well, I'm tired of saying Stormtroopers, and I probably attracted some Star Wars fans. So let's start off with likely the most widespread and most spec op themed dudes, the Tempestus Scions. Primarily specializing in deep strike assaults, recon missions, and infiltrations, Scions are some of the best stormtroopers, if not the best stormtroopers around. Tempestus Scions begin their lives like most people do, as children. From there, they begin their ascent to Sciondom. Often, Scion recruits are orphans of Imperial elites who are raised by the Scala Progenium, which is the same place that commissars, assassins, sisters of battle, and even some inquisitors are taught. Think like 40k versions of those private Catholic schools, except the students and scholars are still somehow less pretentious and insufferable than the average private school kid. At the Scala Progenia, the orphans are put through extremely rigorous training as well as being heavily indoctrinated into the Imperial cult. Part of their training has their memories wiped, and then they get their minds mentally reconstructed into perfectly obedient pawns. Every scion needs to be willing to follow any order without question, no matter how much of a war crime it may or may not be. So they probably just play a COD campaign, and then their final test is braving the dreaded Xbox Live lobby. And to be honest, a lot of the Scion training lore sounds kind of like a middle schooler writing what he thinks to be the most edgy, hardcore, badass stuff he could think of. So I won't touch on every single bit, just fill in the rest with a Mad Lib variation of the above sentence. Kid stepped out of line, so the drill abbot brutally poked their nutsack and then snuggled it in order to set an example to the others. Okay, maybe that one didn't work out super well, but there is some dumb shit like that, like them breaking aspirin's spines and then ripping it out and putting it in a jar, a flipping jar, and then displaying that jar as a warning to others.
So just comment down below your version and we'll see who has the chops to be an Imperial drill abbot. Another funny part of their training is that they need to get rid of their names and replace it with the name of an Imperial hero. This is to make trainees disassociate from their personal identities, as well as being a reminder of the heroism they must aspire to. But I find it funny because just like imagine a Navy SEAL team of some dudes named George Washington, MLK, Paul Bunyan, and Neil Armstrong, all led by Sergeant Elvis Presley. But after rigorous training, each and every recruit is reborn a scion. Equally skilled as they are obedient, as previously mentioned, their main role is often deep striking. They ride Valkyries and Toroxes into critical occasions and use shock tactics to achieve whatever objective they were assigned. Also, Rich Orphan, who went through rigorous training, got high tech gear, and is the peak of humanity. Yeah, put the scions with Kurz in the Batman like fellows of 40k room. Speaking of drop troopers, this one's a bit on the fence if they're technically a type of stormtrooper, but they have carapace armor, they like special weapons, and they're elite troops, so I'll count it. Plus, much like a storm, these dudes love to be in the skies, so they're actually some of the most stormtroopers to ever storm. I'm talking about the Harakoni Warhawks. Using grav shoots, these guys carry out drop assaults and even work closely with scions. The Warhawks are some of the best stormtroopers, if not the best stormtroopers around. Not too much is known about these guys, but that might just be because what is already known is just so badass that any more would make people go insane. The Warhawks train on their native world with grav gliders and are some of the most proficient aerial troops, often compared to the Elysians. I personally think that GW really drop troopered the ball by not giving these dudes a little bit more love. Now, the next few stormtrooper types are a bit less spec ops and more heavy troopers. While they have approximately the same capabilities of all the other stormtrooper types, they are more integrated with the regular guard regiments and foregoes deep strikes and infiltration for a more direct head-on approach. These dudes are generally dropped off in the most brutal combat zones and are just supposed to wreck as much shit as humanly possible. First up, the Death Corps Grenadiers. As you may have deduced from the name, these are the elites of the Death Corps of Krieg. The Death Corps Grenadiers are some of the best stormtroopers, if not the best stormtroopers around. Unlike the Scions, Grenadiers are mostly made up of hardened veterans rather than brainwashed orphans. I mean, the Krieg are kinda all brainwashed orphans, I think, but these brainwashed orphans get to go to war zones instead of school, so probably the better option. Also, unlike Scions, the Grenadiers are actually fully part of their regiment and aren't a specialized regiment that fights along other guard forces. Even more so than regular Kriegers, the Grenadiers are expected to die, which is saying a lot because the regular Kriegers are literally called a death corps. The second word sounding a lot like core, as in CORPSE, core. This means that when appointed a Grenadier, the Guardsman already considers themselves dead and will do anything they are ordered to do with even more fervor, which is pretty metal. It's very similar to the Kriegers. The Armageddon Steel Legion stormtroopers are integrated with the normal regiments and go on the most dangerous spots to, in technical terms, wreck hog. Armageddon Grenadiers are some of the best stormtroopers, if not the best stormtroopers around. I couldn't really find too much information on these guys, but just assume they're yellow version of the Death Corps Grenadiers, just like how the Steel Legion as a whole are yellow versions of the Death Corps of Krieg. Alright, so back to more infiltration focused stormtroopers. The Catachan Devil are skilled at tracking, scout operations, and they are particularly ferocious in melee combat. Catachan Devils are some of the best stormtroopers, if not the best stormtroopers around. And for this section, I just need to say one thing. The legend Sly Marbo is a Catachan Devil. That's it. That's all I need to say to show how badass these dudes really are. But they are really cool, so I'll say a bit more. One particularly cool thing about these stormtroopers is that their senses are so keen that they can sense enemies even if the enemies have cloaking devices. It smells like bitch in here! Kajin Devil's main battlefield tactic is to stealthily infiltrate deep into enemy lines, and then from there they set traps, subtly influence enemy movements, and occasionally ambush some isolated targets. Then, when the rest of the Kajan regiment arrives, the Devils completely break their cover and then pincer the enemy forces. Okay, finally, it's the moment you and I, but mostly I've been waiting for. I finally get to talk about them. I finally get to talk about the coolest troops in the entire world, the Kazarkin. Woo! Just like the rest of the regiment, the Kazarkin are very versatile and used in a variety of ways. From infiltration missions to shock assaults, the Kazarkin can do it all. The Kazarkin are some of the best stormtroopers, if not the best stormtroopers around. This time for real. Unlike Scions, Kazarkin are mostly made up of hardened veterans who have proved themselves in the battlefield. This means that, in general, Kazarkin are more respected and admired than Scions. Kazarkin are normal dudes who are just so gosh darn good at killing things that they got extra training, bigger guns, and cooler clothes, whereas Scions are brainwashed, personality-less weirdos. So many guardsmen look down on Scions as toy soldier glory boys, which
That is ironic considering almost everything in 40k are literally toy soldiers. In addition to veterans, Kazakh can also be picked from particularly promising white shields. If a recruit shows exceptional skills as a white shield, they can be reassigned for Kazakh training. Traditionally, Kazakh were exclusively Cadian, but after the fall of their planet, Kazakh recruits can come from non-Cadian regiments. These non-Cadian recruits typically have to work hard to prove themselves to the Cadian-born Kazakh that they are truly deserving of the prestigious role. If accepted as a true equal, the non-Cadian recruits can earn the Kazakh signature Kadikade Sea Eagle tattoo. While the tattoo is given to all Cadian Kazakh, non-Cadian Kazakh need to show that they're truly the best of the best. They don't call Cadians gatekeepers for nothing. Speaking of the fall of Cadia, although the planet fell, many millions of Kazakh still kick ass across the galaxy, perhaps with even more fervor than the before their planet's destruction. Another interesting product of the planet's fall is how different Kazakh feel towards the loss of their home. Some Kazakh were angry at the Cadians who were present at the fall since they had failed their ultimate duty. Those Kazakh believe that maybe if they were there, perhaps things would have went a little bit better. So they're literally the dude in the "what would you do in this situation? Intervene" tweet. Other Kazakh are angry at themselves for not being at the planet to fight for their home. Even if it was physically impossible for them to be there, they still resent themselves for not doing anything. Due to their anguish, some Kazakh have become even more zealous in order to earn forgiveness for their absence. These Kazakh are the epitome of survivor's guilt, and they probably need some therapy. But no matter how they feel about the fall, the Kazakh are not discouraged and are just as determined and as deadly as before. To the Kazakh and the Cadians as a whole, Cadia stands as long as Cadians are still killing shit. I paraphrase that a bit, but that's basically what they feel like. Kazakh are consistently described as the best of the best, even more so than their contemporaries. Like most stormtroopers, the Kazakh are often dropped into critical points to disrupt enemy lines, usually via Chimera transports or Valkyrie airdrops. A few Kazakh kill teams can completely turn the tide of a losing battle. Kazakh are so well regarded and respected throughout the galaxy that other regiments, as well as notable Imperial Guard figures, can request a service of them. If approved by Cadian High Command, Kazakh teams can be sent to serve as bodyguards, elite troopers, or whatever these funky folk might need them for. Now, if this circle jerk of a section hasn't convinced you that the Kazakh are some of the coolest things in 40k, let me just describe some of their most notable feats. This one gets talked about a lot, but for good reason. It's just absolutely freaking awesome. In the Eisenhorn books, Eisenhorn fights some cultists, and the cultists have a demon host on their side, which is basically just a demon bound to a mortal body. I say just, but being bound to a mortal body actually tends to make demons even more powerful than they are in the Materium. Because you see, demons are beings of the immaterium, so much like an OnlyFans model, they need to spend a great deal of effort to maintain their figure. Demons usually need to spend at least some of their power in order to maintain form in the Materium. Demon hosts, on the other hand, have a convenient body, so they could focus a bit more and go a little bit more nutty. All that was to put this next part into perspective. When Eisenhorn encountered the demon host, his Kazakh guard immediately went to fight the demon host. Their Hellguns didn't work since Eisenhorn was in the way, so they said, "Alright, buddy, no laser, no problem. Get ready to catch these hands." And then these absolute mad lads tackled the demon host, stabbed the crap out of it, ripped his spine out, and momentarily incapacitated it before being slain by the demon. Keep in mind, these are regular, unaugmented humans fighting an ultra mega powered demon in melee. Even though they all perished, 3 regular dudes doing this much damage to a freaking demon host is insane. Another notable feat is how well they fare against Space Marines. GW has always been a bit inconsistent, but Kazakh can match up to Marines seemingly with a ratio of 5 Kazakh to 1 Marine on the lower end to about 30 Kazakh to 1 Marine at the Fall Acadia, which is super impressive. Even if they're being really conservative on the higher end and saying something like 50 Kazakh into 1 Space Marine, that would still make them insanely efficient considering the difference in production time and the sheer numbers. Theoretically, if the Codex Astartes is assumed to be followed by the majority of chapters, then there should be about a million Loyalist Marines, and there are theoretically even less Chaos Marines. On the other end, Kazakh numbers are in the high multi-millions. But again, keep in mind that GW numbers are consistently inconsistent, so you could take that with a grain of salt. But still, really good for regular humans. I just love the Guard because they represent the best of humanity, standing up to the myriad horrors of the galaxy. And to me, Kazakh and Stormtroopers exemplify this the most. Through pure grit, rigorous training, and sometimes a teensy bit of mind-altering chemicals, the indomitable human spirit is embodied in the greatest warriors of the Astra Militarum. So I hope you enjoyed me fangirling about some of the coolest units in all of 40k. I just really love all the Stormtrooper types, from their lore to their whole aesthetic. GW really goes hard on a lot of these guys' designs.
Obviously, the Kazakh design is my favorite. I just love the respirator and the heavy look of the armor, along with their really awesome lore. But the other stormtroopers are super cool as well. The extra armor on the Krieg Grenadiers and their skull mask, that looks freaking awesome. And then the scions, they also look cool, especially in art when they're like round eyes pierce through the fog or the darkness. And then scions are cool, but the old designs for the Inquisitorial Stormtroopers, those were absolutely awesome. I love their asymmetrical masks and their general design. I mean, the models, the poses were a bit wonky at times, and I do prefer the cabled Hellgun. But I would have loved to see the scions being a teensy bit closer to these Inquisitorial Stormtrooper designs. And don't think I forgot about the original Stormtroopers. They're a tad bit plain, but the understated look with the berets is actually really cool. Plus, the cables feeding into the grip is a pretty cool design feature as well.
And that was the Inquisition mega video. It's my first time making a compilation video, but I think it's nice to have a single video to see all the relevant information on a topic. So let me know what you think, and as always, thank you to all the patrons who helped the channel immensely, and thank you for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe, and consider sharing. Thanks.